Hi guys, Paul from the innovation community here. Today I'm with Keith Krut, who is the Director of People Analytics at NASA. So Keith is a strategy and analytics leader in federal government in the United States, and he leads people analytics and also digital transformation challenges as well. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here. Thanks, Paul.
To start with, tell us a bit about yourself in a few words.
In a few words, I'd say I get very excited about the kinds of questions that we ask, as well as the problems and the opportunities that come from them, and how we work together to address them. I think that's probably it in a nutshell. But what I do at work or outside of work often ties into data and technologies and transformation and strategy. But really, it's all to that end of asking good questions and figuring out what to do about what comes from them.
Sounds a lot easier than it is, I'm sure. Where did your analytics career start?
Analytics career started, I think the first moment where I really got hooked was I worked on a really interesting quant project. This was a while ago, maybe about 20 years ago before I came to government, where we were using conjoint analysis in understanding employee preferences. So, what attracts someone to an employer, what makes a job engaging. And I loved the idea of that intersection between, the marketing discipline and the human capital discipline, and using that to understand, kind of what mattered to people. The conjoint, of course, being the method where you might know this from, product development in, say, automobiles, of, hey, would you rather have the bigger engine at a higher price, or more fuel efficiency, middle price, et cetera. And that works well in a lot of different areas. So that was probably a starting point, but from there I kind of got hooked on that focus and built it out into another role using OLAP technologies at a time when it was pretty new in human capital to put together strategic consulting and metrics. And then from there kind of went in a few different directions. So that's probably the starting point.
And 20 years is a long time in the 21st century. How have you seen your role adapt and change over time?
I am constantly seeking, so to speak, and I think the focus for myself in the role has been to pursue as much cross-functional perspective as possible. So, over that time, I've really tried to move into a lot of different disciplines to understand how they use data and analysis, what kinds of data are inherent there, what differences in the culture around data. And that's been the subject of my education too, and graduate school is more, going to a program that's focused on sort of the enterprise cross-functional perspective. And I think that's really suited the way I've seen if that's me in the role, the role itself seems to be moving towards more convergence. And that's where I think it gets really interesting is, that it's not just the functional perspective of HR or CFO or IT, but it's, how do you see the whole picture? And, how do you bring that to decisions that, can have the most impact overall? So that's technology change, it's culture change, it's skills change, and, just so much rapid innovation happening right now. It's pretty exciting.
Sounds it. What are you up to in your current role?
So my current role is, it's kind of the joke about, it's half and half and half and half of several different things. I am still looking at analytics in the human capital function, but as part of enterprise analytics. So how do we build the IT architecture, as well as the workforce and practices and data integrations for cross-functional analytics. But that is also part of a digital transformation effort where I'm working on how we can bring together disparate capabilities to address priority business problems. So one of the biggest challenges is getting paralyzed and thinking about the perfect future, rather than just taking step by step on a key problem to try and to solve it. So digital transformation, as far as the Digital Transformation Grand Challenges program, that we're standing up, as well as our culture and workforce attributes of digital transformation, how we can engender that as part of how we operate. Those are some of the current projects.
Fantastic. And you come across as someone, well, you explicitly mentioned you've worked in this space, but also implicitly that you enjoy it and you have fun. What really interests you about working with analytics?
Uh, I had mentioned in the first round of this about a year ago that it's surprising lots of times to folks that an analytics person studied English literature in school, and it's really that kind of background, the finding the pattern, and the helping connect people around a pattern that I find really interesting. I mean, data is just information. I mean, you really like it, the more that we have capability that can translate just about any information to data. It's just what's around us. So it's a language, and it's our world around us, and it's material. And if you can use that as a way to help people communicate and connect and collaborate with each other, what an amazing capability! What a great way to spend our time. So I'm really trying to figure out how to do that in a way that can help people do things that otherwise they might not have realized they could, and solve challenges in government and otherwise that have previously been pretty difficult knots.
And that leads me nicely onto the next question. What would you describe as some of the big successes you've achieved with this attitude over your career?
I don't know if I would take exclusive credit for anything that I've achieved in my career, but I think some of the great things that I've been able to be around, let's say, I think where I can add impact on that is often I feel like I'm the person who's trying to bring something up early and hire great people who can do something about it. And then really kind of push through those initial hurdles to get it on track. And the private sector, there was some great research around that and some great early kind of build of this momentum around human capital analytics and some other kinds of analytic projects. In government, it was really fun being part of the intelligence community and projects ranging from how to develop the collaboration and workforce needed in that space and new capabilities for thinking about organizational design and careers there, but then also how to think about collaboration in the products. And that customer centricity as part of intelligence integration was a really interesting effort and largely analytically driven. So, these things all build to, future capabilities though. And one of my favorite things is to look back over those seeds that, early on were kind of big question marks and see what they've grown into. And the kinds of things that are out there now are just really remarkable. It's a testament to the dedication and creativity of the workforce working around a lot of these areas.
Mm. Absolutely. And a lot of the people that we do have on the podcast, they tend to come from, big Fortune 500 companies. And this is obviously a little bit different to that. How would you characterize the use of analytics within federal government?
Oh, that's a big question. It's interesting. I mean, there's always leveling. So no matter what your team is, that's part of a larger team, which is part of a larger team. And there's probably teams, in the federal government, there's so many levels. So, there's the levels within individual components of agencies, the communities. Those agencies are part of the broader federal government. All of that is just an integrated part of our world. So the partnerships with industry and external partners. So, I think there's always the question of, how wide to draw the circle on the analytics project. There's certainly more to be gained in working together than alone. And I think that's a critical part of any analytics effort is figuring out how to get scale. But at the same time, if you try to scale it all the way up, you're just going to wind up spinning for a very long time because there's so many different needs and stakeholders to coordinate among. So kind of choosing your marks and figuring out how to build and what makes sense for further collaboration is really very critical. There's certainly another big challenge on analytics in federal government, which is in industry, we always had the bottom line as a dependent variable. And figuring out like what we are going to do and by way of the prioritization of that topic amidst so many potential opportunities, figuring out what we want to model that against can be pretty complicated, but it's a really interesting challenge to try to work with because ultimately, there's so many people who really feel that ability that we're getting closer to new ways to think about how we responsibly steward taxpayer dollars to amazing things. So different challenges, but a lot of similar challenges as well. I try to stay very well connected to industry colleagues and share ideas about what they're working on and what we're working on. And there's a lot more in common than there is different.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that the challenges do tend to be very similar. Just in terms of the execution, it can be can be very diverse. Tell us about a time that you affected change in a major organization, maybe some of the challenges that came with that, how you approached it.
Yeah, well, the change challenges, I think, this often gets to that challenge of, how much are we defining the perfect, and trying to spend our time developing a complete sense of what that should be before we get started. So the areas where I feel like we've made the most progress are in taking specific challenges and trying to, drive change around those. And sometimes that's around workforce planning, on being able to better articulate the needs of a mission and where that needs to go, and doing all the forecasts and projections about where that is now, but where it's heading, and then what that should mean in terms of how we bring in and develop key talent. Sometimes it's questions of organizational design and what are the right level of standards. And analytically, there's so much that we can do around figuring out effective organizational design. I think that area is going to change quite a bit as we move from more of a hierarchical-based way of working to more of a network-based way of working. But I'd say the things that the most accomplishment are from, honestly, it's often just who did you bring in and what have they gone on to do. I think that's when I look at the changes that are most significant. I mean, there's specific projects, and without going into detail on some of those, it's more like, what capability did you build by way of the architecture that can be used for other things, the talent that you brought in, the kind of culture around learning for that project.
Fantastic stuff. And a big question on everyone's minds right now is the whole technology piece, whether that's AI or new programs or ever developing programs. What effects do you think that this will have over the next few years?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, effects and what will affect it. I think there's so much that's changing in the fundamental way that we do things. And, I think the first and foremost that's always on my mind is the ethics implications, and making sure that we are developing responsibly and developing what we will, with a consideration for what we are going to see from that development. And with AI and ML, that gets particularly important, and not hard coding some problems of the past into the future. But there's just so many other ways that we see that. So the ethical implications of it are definitely something that we need to be keeping an eye out for. But also just the way that we think and learn and operate, I feel like could change so significantly. I mean, my kids, like so many others, have been in sort of a variety of virtual and in-person learning over the past year. And I mean, future of work happened almost overnight last year for a lot of people in the workspace, of shifting from seeing people in person to not just seeing screen to screen like we're doing right now, but also a lot of different kinds of asynchronous collaboration. And the way that we work can so frequently shape the way that we think. And I don't really know yet what that all means. I don't think anybody does. So just looking for unintended consequences, I think, is going to be really important as we develop our way forward. I'd say there's also from an implications of the world around us to the use of analytics and analytics broadly. There, that can mean a lot of things now. We have to think about the data that we're generating. I think we know there's obvious sampling problems even in big data. In some ways, they're more insidious than sampling problems in a deliberate research methodology, because you can have overconfidence in the information that you have. So thinking about how we're connecting to different sets of information, how we're processing and interpreting them, how we're serving that out to the folks who can do something with them, but not getting off track in terms of falling in love with certain data sets or methodologies, I think, is going to be pretty important.
Great insights. And obviously, as a people leader, I can run this podcast about asking you about your leadership style. How would you describe it in your own words?
I think people are amazing, and what I try to do is just help people be their kind of amazing. And whether that's just listening and finding the things that might be slowing them down and helping get those things out of the way, or finding the gaps and figuring out how to bridge them. Really, I am very focused on trying to allow people to operate the way that they want to operate, but as part of a system where we can do that together in a way we can accomplish more together than we could alone. Yeah, I'll stop there.
And when it comes to engaging members of the organization with analytics, how would you approach that?
So approaching people about analytics is a very complicated map. You've got people who are all over the board in terms of different domains, different comfort levels with different kinds of data and information analysis. I think the most important thing to me, simply put, is just to really listen to who you're talking to, and not try and just use a one-size-fits-all, but understand what's important to them, and that helps inform what you're doing with the analytics for sure, but it also helps inform how to communicate about them. And that is an exercise in journalism in a way. It's how do you find the right story? How do you tell the right story? There's tools and tactics along the way, and certainly data visualization is one that many people attach to, and that there's so much that you can do by a picture that helps people discover the insight as they're processing it. And especially now that we're getting to the point where it's easier and easier to have incredible visualizations, but also persistent visualizations that can be just part of the way that you work, instead of the great study that starts dying the moment that it's published. How do we keep the live data and monitor different issues? So figuring out how to see what's important to somebody, how to tell that story, and then how to make it actionable and plug into what they're doing with value. I think those are some of the hearts.
Where do you see the biggest opportunity for improvement within the federal government right now? Because it seems like they're getting on board, moving away from the picture of the whole red tape bureaucratic system. It actually seems like, especially in the US, but also in Canada and Europe as well, they are getting on board. Where do you think the next step will be?
Yeah, I mean, I think federal government's been on board for a long time and is very excited about this, and has been working to organize and invest where possible, and make the most out of the resources that we have. There's great things happening in the US with the Evidence Act, and putting more organization and alignment around this kind of work, but it's one of many examples of investment in the space. I think there's always opportunity to look across governments as well. Whether across countries and collaborate there, but also, I find it really interesting when we're collaborating as federal government with state and local governments as well, who are very often very closely connected with the folks that they're serving, can provide a lot of insight and a lot of kind of entrepreneurialism in how we approach it. I think some of the critical issues with government often come down to how we are transitioning from a model that is, kind of organized by the way the money gets spent and the way that, organizations have been built to be operational. But those things are usually orchestrated in a different way than we'd want the data to be organized. So there may be kind of top to bottom architectures that create and house data that you'd really want to be able to be part of a broader data set. So, I think you can see a lot of interesting events on, how we create data architectures and IT architectures to support this across government right now. But it's a hard topic, and there's your usual people, process, technology implications to all of that, and we're trying to often do that on the same budgets that we have to operate in the current system. So, again, it's really a prioritization exercise, and when there's limitless opportunity, that can be challenging. All again, part of why we really need to listen to folks on what's going to have the biggest impact and align our efforts there.
Excellent. So how has COVID-19 affected your role and your ability to really communicate and engage?
Yeah, so first off, you definitely ask good challenging questions here. These are all big ones. There's obviously just tremendous impacts from COVID-19 in so many different ways. And it's been amazing to see how much people have been able to do to help other people throughout what's been happening over the past year with this. I think it has in a lot of ways really catalyzed things that we knew we needed and that now we really can't live without when it comes to data and analytics. And there are a lot of the same issues we've been talking about. How do you put together a cross-functional perspective on safety and facilities planning and resource planning and IT planning and workforce planning? That's a data integration issue. And having kind of the IT architecture to be able to do that, having the teams collaborating with each other to do that, applying new methods to be able to tell a clear story on a highly sensitive, highly time sensitive, highly complex topic area. These are all things that are in a lot of ways, representative of our broader future in analytics. Not to mention, the way that collaboration is unfolding and the kind of technology that we need for that. There's been roadmaps that were, 5-year roadmaps pulled forward into months to be able to respond and support mission more effectively. It was amazing last year seeing things like, the Perseverance that just landed last week, what an amazing thing to see that happen. To see the launch for that happen last year with a team that was more than 90% remote. It was unbelievable, the walkdowns via mobile instead of on site, and teams doing everything they need to do to make sure that went off without a hitch from laptops at home. It's really pretty incredible. So perhaps it's opened our eyes a bit more than it would have otherwise, and there's still so much to do and so much that we could do on that space. So could talk about that for hours in of itself.
Yeah, and I've hit you with a lot of hard questions. What's your top working from home tip?
Top working from home tip. Help my family with it, whatever they need, and make sure the dog is taken care of. I guess those are probably the two most important. But I think I am very grateful for how easy it's been for me compared to others. I think it's the most important tip isn't so much about me, but in general, just remember that people say we're all in the same boat, and we're not really. We're all in the same ocean, but we're all in very different boats. And some people are having a lot harder time with this than others because of their individual circumstances, and I think we need to extend a lot of grace to that, and also figure out how to make sure that that doesn't have a disparate impact in our workforce and our communities. So just again comes back to listen to the people around you is the top tip.
Cool. So last few questions then. What was the biggest mistake you made during your career?
So I guess we're going to continue on the hard questions route. So I think the hardest thing sometimes can be knowing when to move on to the next challenge or when to see the current challenge through one more step. This work is never finished. Analytics is change management. So there's always something further to do. There's always some other way to scale it, to create more capability, to engage other missions, et cetera. It's hard to tell sometimes, when it's the right time to keep personally stretching into something new, and as well as get into that early adopter stage of the curve to try and really pick up pace with the kind of work that I typically do. So I think I am very grateful for the career that I've had, and thankfully there haven't been any major missteps. If there's anything that I do reflect on, sometimes it's did I maybe leave one step too early? If sticking around a little bit more could have helped the pace continue at a high trajectory instead of taking a little bit of a dip and picking up later. So that's probably all I got there.
What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
There was a professor that I had at school who talked about how people, the phrase "dead wrong" comes up quite a lot, and it's a very common thing. But the phrase "dead right" doesn't come up quite as often, and it's as or more common when you can really get kind of locked into a certain solution or a certain way of working, and so much so that you're not receptive to those around you or to how things might have changed. I think the best advice is just listen out for when you're dead right and not get so locked in. But some of the topics from earlier as well, that just focus on a problem. I think that's also very good advice. A close advisor and mentor was telling me that they just have on a sticky on their computer monitor, like focus on the problem as their daily just reminder. So a couple of good ones.
Yeah, very good. What are you curious about right now?
I mean, how are we not curious about everything right now? There's so much uncertainty. I think one of the, sticking with the theme for analytics and technology here, I think one of the things I'm really curious about is how we're going to adapt our methods to better account for black swan events. They're just increasingly all around us. And what does that mean? When the almost impossible becomes the commonplace, how do you factor that into your decision support models? So I'm curious how that's going to adapt. I'm curious about some of the things that I mentioned earlier too, about how our way of thinking will evolve with new ways of working, new kinds of education, new ways of learning, especially. And I'm curious how this future network model is actually going to play out. I mean, there's so much that we're working on to try and adapt just the very foundations of the way we organize into a very new model. So yeah, no shortage of things to be curious about. So Paul, I'm expecting our next hour, you're going to tell me all the answers to all these things. I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast to try and get people together who have more answers than I have questions.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. So it's like, I think in 2 years, a lot of the stuff we'll talk about could even be redundant, obviously maybe apart from the people stuff. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be an easy question, but I can see you've got a lot of books behind you. So who's currently your favorite author? Might be a difficult one.
Favorite authors. Again, the English major background, I try and keep a fair balance of, fiction and nonfiction. Right now, lately, I've been probably reading more of the work-related stuff. I'm finding, for one thing, pretty much anything that Josh Bersin publishes to be spot on. Adam Grant, I feel like, is just spot on so much of what he's publishing as well. I'm really impressed with the way that John Cotter has been continuing to stay so at the forefront, and his book Accelerate is on my night table right now, and thinking about how we adapt to agile ways of working and kind of network-based org model. Scott Page, I feel like, has been very relevant lately. Some of the work that he's published in the diversity bonus, his reference to the model thinker is phenomenal, just having a bunch of tools out there. I guess if there's one that I cite most often, it's Carol Dweck and mindset, the idea of growth mindset. But Brene Brown, I feel like, always on point. Sorry, I'm just turning this into a bibliography instead of a favorite author, but those are some of the ones that have been on my mind a lot lately.
No, I like it. The more the merrier. There's always, I find there's always too much to read, but I always want more. What is your favorite quote?
Favorite quote? Well, I think the one that has been coming up quite a lot. There's a quote from Greek philosophy of no person ever crosses the same river twice. It's never the same person, never the same river. I feel like there's so many challenges that we're facing that feel like challenges we've faced before, but so much has changed around us, and we've changed so much that it's just a good reminder to keep fresh eyes. Also a fan of the Einstein quote, keep it as simple as possible, but no simpler. I'm sure I'm butchering that in the actual syntax, but there is a lot of complexity, and we need to try to reduce complexity where we can, but also acknowledge that complexity in the way we're thinking.
And my final question, what advice would you give for aspiring leaders in analytics?
This is a really interesting area because we're going through a bit of transition in this field. I mean, it's been in the space for a while, and it's been a field that in a lot of ways has been emergent, and in some ways it's arrived, and that means different things from a career perspective. I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, a kind of a utility player could have a real kind of leadership career in this space by thinking about kind of what are the right questions to be asking and pulling in kind of key specialists in certain areas to really dive into the actual tools and methods. Whereas increasingly I think that the leadership roles are going to need to have a more robust understanding of those tools and methods to be able to cross-check the work and to be able to inspire new ways of really adapting those fundamental parts. So, for someone in analytics, I think, it's probably a good time to be asking yourself, do I want to really double down on a career in analytics and everything that means for, filling some of the foundational parts, and it might mean, going back and kind of learning more of the foundational coding piece, or some of the foundational statistics piece, and it's certainly going to mean a commitment to staying very current in that space. Or is it more compelling to me to think of analytics as kind of a stop in the journey here towards more broader leadership? I think we need leaders who understand analytics more and understand data more. So it's one path to go, all the way through to, a full career in analytics. It's another to think about that as part of a broader career. So I think that's probably a good thing to be reflecting on right now. But otherwise, connect with other people, connect with other information. Don't get complacent. Really look outside of what you usually look at and talk to people that are outside of who you usually talk to. And across all the above, again, just stay focused on the problem. I mean, it's so easy right now to look at everything through hey, how does ML help me solve that problem? How does RPA help me solve that problem? And meanwhile, it's, well, let's just think about the problem for a minute and really what's the best solution, rather than try and focus on, all these great solutions that are out there right now. Great inspiration, but it shouldn't be a focus for thinking critically.
Wise words from Keith Krut, Director of People Analytics at NASA. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul.